Folks, I love starting a program, hosting a program where I'm sharing some good news. In this case, it's great news. And that great news is coming up next. It has to do with Stephen Curry. Brandin Podziemski, his Golden State Warriors backcourt member, also said some interesting things in an interview recently. We're going to talk about that and so much more. Come join the party. It's the Golden Days.
They always find something to nitpick, and that's because there's expectations for us to win. It was a pretty crazy night.
Woo! Let's go!
In a minute, I'ma need a sentimental man or woman to pump me up. Come on and break me off. Cause I get what I want and I like what I see. If you got
Thursday? We're almost at Friday? Another week in the book? That's the Warriors lifer? Hey, welcome to the Golden Days. I'm your host, Cyrus Saatsaz. You can follow me over on Threads and Instagram. Same company, same handle, @DogWild. I'm also over on Elon's excuse of a cesspool for a social media platform. I'm available there as well at Surf Journalist. The program is available on all social media platforms at one handle. It's super easy. So if you don't want to follow me, but you want to know what's going on with the show, it's at Golden Days Pod. Welcome. And before I get into the great news about the Golden State Warriors, got to give some love to the official sponsor of Golden Days, and that's BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. And by the way, on this note, congratulations, 49ers fans. I consider myself a part of that group. Brandon Ayuk has signed an extension. He's not going anywhere. That is more good news, but this is not a 49ers show. This is a Warriors show. But I'm talking about BetOnline. Football's around the corner. You can bet on that action. And if you think you know your stuff, you can get in on a $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. So when the game's over, kick back, put your feet up, pour yourself a stiff one. My preference, my pick of choice for my concoction is straight up scotch. I'm a scotch drinker. I love this stuff. It is delicious. It is yum yum in your belly. So whatever your drink of choice is, whatever your poison, pour yourself a stiff one. Or maybe you want to light them up if you got them. Whatever your choice for pleasure, sit back, relax, and while you're doing so, get in on a game of blackjack or poker. Or maybe you want to unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here. And I've also put the link in the chat. If anyone wants to join me today, this is likely going to be a short yet sweet episode. And when I say sweet, sorry, I want to get some air in here. I say it's sweet because Stephen Curry, one of the greatest players in the history of this game, an individual that I am rooting for to get a 5th title, selfishly, I might add, because if Stephen Curry gets a 5th ring, woo, talk about legacy. I mean, how can someone who roots for LeBron James call him the GOAT of all time? How can they call him the GOAT of his own era when Stephen Curry, his biggest rival, now apparently his buddy, his chum, his pal, his friend, has more championships than him? You can't. I want Stephen Curry to get a 5th ring. He's good enough. Gosh darn it, people like him. He's just that awesome of a human being, that awesome of a basketball player. And if he's going to get a 5th ring, it's likely going to be with the Golden State Warriors. And that likelihood increased today because Stephen Curry announced, or his agent more specifically announced, that he has signed a 1-year contract extension to stay with the Golden State Warriors if he plays out the deal. He's now under contract for 3 more years, including this upcoming season, where if he plays out that contract, he'll be 40 years old when that deal is over. 40! So good for him. Good for the Golden State Warriors. Good for this fan base. The San Francisco Bay Area is not letting go of Stephen Curry. He's our boy. He's staying right here. And again, a 1-year extension. He's going to get paid the absolute max amount that the team could have offered him, $62.6 million. That is what he is scheduled to earn 3 years from now, or 2 years and change from now. And he's probably not going anywhere. Look, I believe him. He's a genuine dude. I believe him wholeheartedly when he says that he's not going anywhere. He wants to be a Golden State Warriors lifer. And this just adds to the evidence. Now, the CBA, the reason why he signed just a 1-year deal and not a contract, let's say 3, 4, 5 years, is because the CBA has this rule in it in the NBA. It's called the over 38 rule, which prevents teams from offering contracts of 4 years or more to players who are or will be 38 years old during that deal. And the reason why that stipulation was included in the CBA is to prevent teams from hurting themselves by offering, these massive contracts to players who could be well in their 40s by the time the contract expires. It was basically put in to protect teams from themselves so that they don't just hand out tons of cash to washed up players. And so that's all Steph could add on because he already had 2 years remaining on his deal. So the most he could do was add just a 1-year extension to that. But regardless, if you consider yourself a Warriors fan, if you consider yourself someone who appreciates the connection that an individual athlete has with the community, with the team. In other words, if you like the idea of players staying with their teams long-term, it's a win for you folks. If you want Luka Doncic to be a lifer with the Mavericks, if you want and like the idea of Giannis Antetokounmpo being a lifer with the Milwaukee Bucks, if you like the idea of Ja Morant being a lifer with the Memphis Grizzlies, then you'll support a move like this. And again, he has shown his allegiance to the San Francisco Bay Area, and Stephen Curry's a lifer. That's just phenomenal news. And there's a lot of perks and positives to this on both sides, for both the Warriors and for Stephen Curry. First of all, just a few random tidbits I picked up in reading some news pertaining to Steph agreeing to the extension. Steph's going to become just the third NBA player in NBA history, alongside LeBron James and alongside Kevin Durant, to pass $500 million in career earnings just from NBA paychecks. So that's incredible. He basically, by the time this contract is over, if Stephen Curry plays it out, he will have earned over $500 million. And I don't say this for most people, but I will say this for Stephen Curry. I'm happy for him. He's earned it. Considering his impact on the value of the Warriors, considering his impact on the sport of basketball and the league he plays for, the NBA, there's some stat that I saw the other day where, and don't quote me on this, but it's close to accurate, maybe it's entirely accurate, that Stephen Curry, of the 27 most watched games in the last, I think, like 25 years, Stephen Curry played in all of them. He's a superstar. He is one of the biggest stars in basketball history, and he's getting paid appropriately for it. So congrats to Steph for being on his way to being a billionaire when you consider his investment with Under Armour, when you consider all the other media projects he's undoubtedly going to get into and what he's already into now. He's going to be a billionaire, folks, and it's good to see the good people of this world accumulate that level of wealth. That's huge. And again, the meaning behind this, there's a lot, right? I mean, this is a vote of confidence in the Golden State Warriors from Stephen Curry, meaning by Stephen Curry agreeing to this commitment, he's telling the Warriors, I have faith in you to do the right thing. I have faith in you to not squander the last few years of my career and turn me into the next Kobe Bryant. It also sends a very strong message to his teammates, telling them, I ain't going anywhere, right? So if you're a member of the Golden State Warriors, and if you're a potential free agent at some point considering signing with the Golden State Warriors, this is a vote of encouragement for every one of those individuals. If someone is thinking about signing with the Warriors, and maybe they're thinking twice, wondering, is Stephen Curry going to be gone in 2 years? Now you don't have to worry about that, right? He's committed to the team, and he's committed to the Warriors taking that next step with this roster in pursuit of that 5th championship for this dynasty and for him. This also incentivizes the Golden State Warriors to continue trying to improve. Because, look, they care about image. They don't want to be looked at as a team who is taking Stephen Curry for granted, who's using him as a marketing gimmick and ploy to fill seats without pursuing wins, without pursuing championships. Becomes a hell of a lot harder to be just a business entity in professional sports, trying to just, collect every penny you can when you have Stephen Curry on your roster, because you have to do this for him. You have to try to get the most out of your team for Steph, right? It's a mutually beneficial decision. And for Stephen Curry, by signing this extension now at the age of 36, you're ensuring that regardless of what happens these next 2 years, when you're 39 years old, you have a $62.6 million contract waiting for you. Like, imagine if Stephen Curry, hypothetically speaking, had an awful season this year, right? Let's say his shooting went down. Let's say he suffered, and I hope none of this happens, obviously. I'm sorry for even putting this out there, but let's say he suffers some sort of injury. Who knows? Maybe his value dips. Maybe he has the type of year this upcoming season where Joe Lacob and company suddenly look at him and go, yeah, I don't know about a max extension for 39 going on 40. Now that choice is no longer an option for him. So Stephen Curry secured the bag for himself and his family. So regardless of what happens when he's 39 years old, he's still going to get what is right now the biggest deal, single season deal, I believe, in NBA history. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think any other individual player has ever been made more than $62.6 million in a season. So congratulations to Stephen Curry. Congratulations to the Golden State Warriors for keeping one of the game's transcendent superstars on your team for 3 more years. Now, who knows if it's going to be 3 years? I mean, and this is the beauty of the position that Stephen Curry is in. He has a lot of leverage where 2 years from now, he might be looking at that final season and thinking to himself, yeah, $62.6 million is nice, but I'm kind of burned out. I'm kind of over this. He could still just walk away at any point, but this secures him in terms of, whatever additional financial security. I don't know if he needs it, but now he's got it. And for the Warriors, they have a commitment from one of the game's biggest stars ever. And hopefully that'll help them in terms of roster improvements. Now, speaking of roster improvements, I want to shift gears real fast from talking about Stephen Curry. And I want to briefly bring up his backcourt teammate, Brandin Podziemski. I'm going to take a drink of water real fast. Apologies for that. Thank you very much for your patience. Brandin Podziemski was recently interviewed by The Athletic and said something interesting enough to bring up on the show. And that was votes of confidence, voices of reassurance from the Golden State Warriors, letting Podziemski know how much they value him and how it would take an awful lot to pry him from the team in terms of a trade. And we all know the Lauri Markkanen story. Again, if the reports are true, the Utah Jazz would have possibly given the Warriors Lauri Markkanen if the team was willing to include Brandin Podziemski in the deal. And the Warriors decided, no, we're not going to give up Brandin Podziemski. We value him. And so who knows in terms of details, whether or not that was the difference. But there's been a couple reports out there from credible individuals saying so. So we have to believe, based on what's been reported, that was the case, that the Warriors, had they included Brandin Podziemski along with, a couple first-round picks, You could have brought back Lauri Markkanen. Rick Barry and I did a show yesterday. And again, the Rick Barry show is hosted live on the Mic'd Up app. Strongly encourage you downloading it simply because you can catch live episodes of the Rick Barry show. And a huge perk of catching the show live is we play these voice recordings that whoever out there, if you want to upload a message for Rick to hear directly and to address directly, you can do so. It's got this awesome like voice recording feature in the app where you can literally, I think you have 30 seconds to express whatever opinion you want, ask whatever question you want, and Rick will address it. The only time we don't play clips is if there's multiple questions repeating the same question. In other words, if you're redundant in what you're asking, we might not get to it. But again, if you want your voice heard, we're listening. And the Rick Barry show, again, it's live on the Mic'd Up app. Then we rebroadcast it on Golden Days. But the Mic'd Up app, the way it's set up is Rick and I record these shows on our phones. And we're doing it live. And for Rick, it makes life super easy. I think that was a huge incentive for him I can't remember if he's like an investor in the company or what his stake is specifically. But besides having a vested interest in Mic'd Up, and again, Rick's my boy, I'm going to support him to the end. The quality is not the greatest. That's why I'm bringing that up. Is because we're recording it on our phones. I don't have an opportunity to actually talk into this microphone. So the quality is not necessarily as good. Same with the video, again, because we're using our phones for that. Just in case you're wondering why the quality of the Rick Barry show. I've heard from a few people. They're like, "Hey, man, we couldn't hear you quite as good, or we couldn't see you quite as good." The Rick Barry show is recorded on our phones, and then I do my best to touch it up and then republish it here. On yesterday's Rick Barry show, Rick talked about the fact that if the Warriors are going to be successful this season with this current roster that he has, and I really love when Rick opens up and provides analysis on the Golden State Warriors personnel decisions, on the systems they have implemented, because I mean, who knows basketball better than Rick? I mean, maybe there's some equals out there, but you're not going to have anyone who has more insights, who has more knowledge of the game itself than Rick. And we broke down the roster considerably. And I asked Rick whether or not, if he was the GM, if he would have included Brandin Podziemski in a deal to get Lauri Markkanen. And Rick started really thinking about what this Warriors team would look like if Lauri Markkanen was included. And he repeated the sentiments that myself and quite a few others have said, that if we were in those shoes, we would have traded Brandin Podziemski for Lauri Markkanen, just because of how incredible of a fit Markkanen would have been. To picture a 7-footer with his skill set playing alongside Stephen Curry, that would have been a championship contending team. And it puts a lot of pressure on Podziemski now, right? Because Podziemski is now the guy who the team potentially passed up trading for Lauri Markkanen for. And so again, Rick thought the team should have made that deal. I agree. I'm not sitting here saying with the utmost of conviction that, that was a mistake, but regardless, and Rick also talked about how this Warriors roster is currently constructed. He's not super stoked on it. And he agreed with my sentiments, which is that if this team is going to make it next year, if this team's going to be an actual contender next year, if you're going to do Stephen Curry right, this roster is currently constructed. It ain't it. So we'll see. It's just, again, I look at big decisions in life and I apply the probability game to it. And maybe that was ingrained to me from my early gambling days leading to, my bets on sports now. Maybe it has to do with just my personal interest and line of thinking, aligning a lot with, logic and reasoning and applying critical thinking skills to, every concept and situation we have in life. And the point is, you look at this roster right now, and there is just so much pressure on the young guys, Kuminga, Podziemski, to a lesser extent. Well, I don't know if Trace Jackson-Davis is a lesser extent. They're going to really be relying on him as one of the only bigs on this team. And then who knows what happens with Moses Moody. But regardless, it's the Warriors' fate is largely resting in the hands of the team's youngsters. Meaning, if Jonathan Kuminga does not turn into an all-star caliber player this year, if Brandin Podziemski does not at least come close to an all-star caliber level of play, if Trayce Jackson-Davis cannot man up against the Nikola Jokic's, the Giannis Antetokounmpos, the Anthony Davises of the world, this team's in trouble. There's just too much pressure being placed on Stephen Curry to carry this load. And so that was Rick's sentiments. I agreed with them. And again, that episode is now published and available if you want to check that out. But Brandin Podziemski, again, going back to this interview that he recently conducted with The Athletic, which is owned by the New York Times, in case you ever wonder, why does it say New York Times when I'm trying to read an Athletic story? It's because they're the same company. The New York Times is The Athletic's parent company, and the New York Times, I believe, has scrapped their own sports department, so they're relying entirely on The Athletic for all their sports coverage. But Podziemski said something interesting, and before I get to that, a few folks in the chat right now are jumping in. John Holmes writing, but Podziemski and 3 to 4 ones gut the future that it could have bankrupted the future. I hear you. It would have been 2 first rounders and a possible pick swap. That's all the Warriors could have done. My response to that is, and Rick said this yesterday as well, Lauri Markkanen is not old. I mean, he's turning 28 years old this season, so it's not like you're bankrupting your entire future for that deal. We also don't know who else would have been included besides Podziemski. You still would have had Kuminga. I don't think Trayce Jackson-Davis would have been included in that deal. So you're not mortgaging him. And again, bigger picture, if you're saving those picks, great. But how does that do justice for Stephen Curry, who is still on this team, right? And Keith Willis in the chat adding that the Warriors are being realistic. Titles are over. They won't make a single move. And look, if I can't disagree with you given the way the team is currently constructed. But again, this brings up then the Stephen Curry point, right? Is justice being served to Steph by not trying to form a team around him that is a title contender? I do agree with you, Keith, in this the way the team is currently looking. Yeah, I don't know if you can call him a title contender, but anyway, so and then John Holmes adding as well, play Podziemski, play Moses Moody. And again, I don't know how Moody's going to get minutes given the number of wings on this team. Play Kuminga, play Draymond Green, Stephen Curry. You would like to see and bring Trayce Jackson-Davis and Jamaican 3-ball fire. We're much better than Clay. Looney's slow feet is gone. And then DF in the chat. And I agree with this. I know Larry Krueger has been one of the only folks bringing up Ben Simmons and the Warriors taking a flyer with him. I would 100% go for that if the hypothetical trade is, let's say, Wiggins and GP2 for Ben Simmons. I would 100% take a flyer on that. For the simple reason, Ben Simmons, even if he can't shoot, he's still 6'10". He's still a solid defender. He can still handle the ball like a point guard, which automatically means Steve Kerr would play him. I would not hate that. And yeah, and just to add to that, DF, I agree with you as well. Ben Simmons as your center, why not, right? Yeah, I'm with you, man. And in regards to a future trade, you brought up Cam Johnson, who is at the top of my list right now in terms of who's out there for the Warriors to pursue. But anyway, so going back to and John Holmes, I wish Cam Thomas for Andrew Wiggins would be the deal. I don't know if the Brooklyn Nets bite on that trade. I'm guessing you have to include at least a first rounder besides Wiggins, because they're in rebuild mode, right? So you're gonna have to throw in something else. But and not Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson. I think you wrote Cam Thomas. Same with DF. I think Cam Johnson is the player. I hope that's who you're referring to. So Brandin Podziemski in this interview said a couple of interesting things. He first said that that Mike Dunleavy Jr. reassured him that the team had no plans to trade him, which I'm sure from Podziemski's perspective makes him feel way better, knowing that the team is giving him this much faith and letting him know that they don't plan on trading him. Again, unless they just absolutely blow their socks off. And I thought Lauri Markkanen would have, but apparently it did not. The more interesting part of the story is what Podziemski revealed in regards to owner Joe Lacob, the man who has the final say in all of these deals. And what Podziemski revealed is that Joe Lacob let Podziemski know that Joe Lacob had dinner with Utah Jazz owner Ryan Smith just the night before. And this was during Summer League. I believe their paths crossed in Las Vegas. And who knows what went on in this dinner? Maybe that dinner is where it was determined that the Jazz wanted Podziemski, and maybe that's the dinner where Joe Lacob said, hell no. But what Podziemski revealed in this story was, quote, let me start over. Podziemski repeated what Joe Lacob told him. And what Joe Lacob said, according to Podziemski, is, quote, you don't have anything to worry about. You're a priority here, unquote. And then Podziemski himself added he appreciates that, especially being a rookie who just finished up his rookie season. And Podziemski added this quote as well, quote, they could keep me in the dark until a trade is done, but Mike and Joe were transparent from the draft to the Paul George situation to the Markkanen situation. So there's been multiple instances of communication, and they're keeping Podziemski in the loop. And the most important thing out of all this is they really value Podziemski. And this, a year, 2 years from now, could end up being a moment where these two are eating crow and they made a huge mistake in hindsight, or they're going to look like geniuses. And Brandin Podziemski is going to end up being a regular fixture of the Golden State Warriors, a major important contributor for this team. We'll find out. We'll find out. But it's the team is clearly committed to Pods. And it's going to take a lot if another team wants to pry him away. Jay Talks in the chat writes, Ben Simmons hasn't played more than 60 games since 2018-19. You're correct. He's played less than 50 the last 2 seasons. That is also correct. Might as well keep Wiggins. Here's where I will push back. You have a pretty good idea what you're getting with Wiggins. You're getting a player who for 5 or 6 years in a row now, certainly since his time with the Warriors, has seen his scoring output decline every single year. Steady line. He's a player in regression. He has shown no indication that he represents a semblance of the man who in 2022 was a force on the court, especially in that postseason. With Ben Simmons, here in regards to the games missed, Rick Celebrini has shown me that he is fantastic as the team's head medical doctor, whatever his title is. And he's done wonders. I mean, I will never, ever forget what he did with Otto Porter Jr. in 2022. OPJ was vitally important for that Warriors team winning a chip. OPJ's career was over because of those foot injuries, but Celebrini kept him going that whole year. And the same goes for most other players who play for the Warriors. I know Draymond had a back issue a couple years ago. That wasn't a concern that I thought was going to affect him long term, but he's been relatively consistent. And I like Rick Celebrini. I like the job he's done as, again, the head of medicine for the Warriors, as their chief medical professional. And so I totally understand the concern with Ben Simmons, but I'll respond with this. Let Rick Celebrini work his magic, right? And Ben Simmons is 6'10". Ben Simmons brings you size. Ben Simmons is a better ball handler than Wiggins. And all I'm saying is why not? I don't think you can get worst making that swap. It also relieves a lot of pressure in terms of the wing position which Wiggins plays. And if you make that trade, now all of a sudden you can start playing Moses Moody. Now all of a sudden you don't have to worry as much about DeAnthony Melton. You don't have to worry about, all these other wings. Gary Payton II getting minutes. You don't have to worry about Buddy Hield getting minutes. There is a massive logjam in the wing position, and Wiggins is a part of that. So it would relieve some pressure on that front. And that's why I wouldn't be opposed to it. Again, I'm not sitting here saying Ben Simmons is the answer. I'm not sitting here saying Ben Simmons is going to magically reverse the fortunes of the Golden State Warriors and make them contenders. All I'm saying is it's a very low risk and very high reward gamble that you'd be taking, swapping Wiggins for Ben Simmons. But I also hear what you're saying if you're concerned about it. I totally get it. Mark Lamboy in the chat writes, so who do you think is going to start the 5 position this coming season? You mean the center position? Trayce Jackson-Davis. I wholeheartily believe in that. I think he's the center of the present and the future. He was starting a lot of games down the stretch for the Warriors. I think he proved his worth. I mean, if Trayce Jackson-Davis plays the whole year, he would have made the all-rookie second team at least, if not the first team. So, yeah, Trayce Jackson-Davis is your 5. And as of right now, I think the only question mark in regards to the starting lineup is who's going to be your starting 2. And even that, I don't think is much of a question. It seems like Brandin Podziemski is going to be the starting 2. Kuminga is going to be the starting 3. Draymond Green is going to be your starting 4. And then the only remaining question is Stephen Curry good enough to outplay D'Anthony Melton to be your starting point guard? Or maybe Brandin Podziemski is your starting point guard. I don't know. I don't know if Stephen Curry is good enough. Obviously, I hope you understand it being facetious saying that. So, yeah. And then John Holmes bringing up in the chat, what do you think about that Brazil guy who scored 30 against Team USA? That player you're referring to, his name is Bruno Caboclo. And I'll share this graphic with you so that for the YouTube audience, you don't have to just stare at my mug the entire time. And this player there is a little intrigue here, right? This is someone who's a former first-round pick, is not a great outside shooter. He's shown flashes of stretching the floor by being a 3-point threat, but he's also shown, I think his career 3-point number is in the 31% range for shooting from beyond the arc. His best season, he had a decent clip, but it was just 1 year. Look, first of all, I don't know how the hell the team would add him because, again, they only have approximately $500,000 of cap space. And regardless of who you add, you're going to have to pay them more than $500,000 because of CBA rules, right? You have veteran minimum contracts that start well above $1 million. So I don't know if a 2-way deal is what you're going to offer him. And then I don't know who you replace him with. I don't know if Reese Beekman is the odd man out. I don't know if Pat Spencer is the odd man out. I don't know if Daquan Plowden is the odd man out, but someone would have to be bumped out to fit Caboclo. And then that also raises the question of, what are they going to do with Quentin Post? They still don't know how they're going to fit him into the picture. Anyway, so we're going back to this Brazilian player, Caboclo, his agent, who I think was partly conducting interviews to raise interest for his client, who's probably going to end up playing for an Israeli pro team. And that team, I believe, is called Hapoel Tel Aviv. Caboclo last year, I believe, played for a Serbian club, but I don't think he wants to play in that country and or that team anymore. We'll see. But I haven't heard anything new on that front. Supposedly, he's training here in San Francisco with the Warriors until today. Today is Thursday when we're recording this. I don't know, man. I mean, look, if these are the kinds of moves you're relying on, don't keep your hopes up. Is all I have to say. But I don't know. I still don't know how they're going to add anyone. I don't know what I don't know. I have no idea what the plan is here as currently constructed, because again, the Warriors are just $500,000 below the cap. They're hard capped because of the sign-in trades that they conducted this offseason, meaning that they cannot spend a penny over the first apron, which is approximately $178 million. And right now they're up against that. They only have $500,000 to spare. They cannot sign Quentin Post. They cannot sign Caboclo. I have no clue what the plan is. DF in the chat saying, what are your thoughts on Jakob Poeltl? I wouldn't hate it. Again, I'm not giving up the house for him, but if the proposed trade is Andrew Wiggins and Kevon Looney for Jakob Poeltl, sign me up. Hell yeah. I mean, the guy has a high basketball IQ. I don't think he's a deterrent, meaning I don't think he's a negative on this team. If you add him, I think he would be a sound backup center to Trace Jackson Davis. Are you bringing him up because you heard something, or is that just a random name that you've seen out there? But I also don't think Jakob Poeltl turns you into a championship contender. Again, these are not sexy names that are being tossed out there, right? Like like Bruno Caboclo. Okay. Kristen Peak, who was a fantastic guest, about as good as you can get for any program, was on the show a couple days ago. And her thoughts for Quentin Post was, don't expect, an impact player his rookie season. And a Mark Lamboy in the chat saying, what about Clint Capella? Wouldn't hate that. I know some people have said that, he doesn't move the needle for them. I would not mind Clint Capella. If you add Capella to your team, you're bringing someone who at a minimum is going to be a nuisance for the game's best bigs, right? If Capella's guarding Jokic will still get his points, but it's not going to be easy. Giannis will get his points. Anthony Davis will get his points, but it won't be easy. Sign me up. I would love Clint Capella. Again, you're not getting a score from him. You're not getting a shooter from him, but you are getting defense. You are getting someone who's going to clog the paint and make opposing players think twice about just driving in there unimpeded, which is what a lot of teams are looking at right now when they see the Warriors, right? There is no fear on the faces of other teams when they see the Warriors defense because of how small they are. So Clint Capella would help in that regard. He's a fantastic shot blocker, fantastic rebounder. I think he's in the final year of his contract. So if it doesn't work out, you can say, peace right after that. Sign me up. I'd be all in on it. So we shall see what happens. I really wish we could have had a party for Lauri Markkanen. That unfortunately will not be the case. By the way, I'm sorry if I hadn't mentioned this in the chat. I did provide a link. I did mention it. If anyone wants to jump in, we're going to start wrapping up the show here, but did want to circle back around to the main topic of the program, and that is Stephen Curry. Wardell Stephen Curry has signed the extension. So at a bare minimum, you don't have to worry about Steph playing for another team. The idea of him finishing his career, let's say in Charlotte, get that idea out of your mind. Go fantasize about another player coming onto your team. He's not going to the Lakers. Again, we did a brief but very clear-cut show just a few days ago, reminding people that is a rumor. Stephen Curry is not going anywhere. Greg Gordon, by the way, asking about the player we were just talking about for 5 minutes or so, about Bruno Caboclo. Just hit the rewind button, Greg, and we covered that name. Still don't know what's going to happen there. But again, even if hypothetically the Warriors fall in love with this guy, two problems. One, I don't know how they're going to add him. And two, he's not going to save the day. Okay, he would be a nice reserve big. I wouldn't hate it. Again, this team desperately needs size, but he's not someone that just turns the team into a title contender overnight. Donovan Michaels, thank you sincerely from the bottom of my heart. Kev F tossing some ducats in there, so of course I'm going to highlight you. And I know that's a Niners related topic, but I actually covered that at the beginning of the show. That Brandon Ayuk, for you Niner fans out there, congratulations. I bleed red and gold. All right, I've said this before. I'll say it again. In my life, I've cried twice over sports. And I was obviously a kid both times. One of those was when Kirk Gibson blasted that grand slam off Dennis Eckersley. Sorry for you Gigante fans out there, but I did like the A's more, and it's a tragedy that what's happened to that team. But anyways, and the second time I cried was when Matt Barr nailed what I believe was a 39-yard field goal to prevent the Niners from three-peating in 1990. Yeah, I shed tears. I was crying. I was a little kid, and it affected me. So point is, for I bleed red and gold. I love the Niners. And the fact that they signed Brandin Ayuk is huge. He's a fantastic football player. He's a star wide receiver. How could you not be stoked on that? So in one day, yeah, our two teams, or at least my two teams, the Warriors, the Niners, they gave contract extensions to, well, the Warriors gave it to their best player, no question there, and the Niners gave it to one of their best players in Brandin Ayuk. So that is absolutely good news. And Kev, I know you dropped $2 for your chat to be highlighted. This program has a membership program where you can call yourself a Golden Dazer, and I think it's like $2.99. And your chat, all your chat posts will immediately be highlighted, so I address every single one of them. You'll also get an advanced opportunity to watch certain shows, like the Kristen Peak show, for example, was available like 18 hours ahead of when it was released for the Golden Dazers. And I think it's like $2.99. So save some money, become a member instead, so you don't have to pay any more for your chats to be featured. And again, this is a business, folks. I apologize for the solicitation there. Bruce Morrow in the chat writing, I will cry tears of joy if Wiggins and Draymond are gone. I'm totally feeling you on the Wiggins aspect of it. The Draymond aspect of it, I get that a lot of people have turned sour on him and his antics, but don't forget, he still can play. He still is one of the best defenders in the NBA. This team is vitally reliant on him for both defense and offense. And he's Stephen Curry's enforcer, right? He's the guy that's got Steph's back. That is one of his biggest roles of importance on this team. So while you hate him, and I get it, it's hard for me to argue with you on that. It's hard for me to have present discourse with you regarding Draymond Green because his antics suck. But with that said, on the basketball court, man, he's still so important. But with Andrew Wiggins, 100%, man. I don't know what the team is doing with him still on the roster. And maybe it's like what certain people on the show have said, that his value is just so toxic. No one wants him. He's at that Zach LaVine level of toxicity when it comes to his contract and his value. But Kev F, thank you again for the contribution. Anything else? Are we good for the day? Stephen Curry's a Warrior for life. I think that is fantastic news. Bravo, Steph. Bravo, Warriors. Good moves by both parts. Now let's surround Steph with some mother effing talent. Let's give him a real shot at number 5. How awesome would think about that for a second. Think how awesome that would be if Stephen Curry had 5 championships and LeBron James had 4. Do you realize? And here's the thing. I respect and value LeBron tremendously. It's his fans who make me cringe, and his fans, his diehard ones, the ones that come out there and ignorantly say that LeBron's the GOAT. They're the ones that annoy me when it comes to LeBron, right? He's got this fan base that think LeBron James is the greatest thing since sliced bread. He's a great human being, one of the greatest basketball players ever. I have him now number 2 on my all-time list. But he's not sniffing Jordan, and his fans are annoying. And how awesome would it be if Stephen Curry had one more championship than LeBron James? His fan base would lose their minds. They would go apeshit over that. I want to see it. I really do. And Bruce Morrow adding that Curry is retiring in 2027. Might be the case when he's 40 years old. Absolutely. Enter the Draymond saying, we need Kevin Durant. If the price is not steep, sign me up. But I don't think the Phoenix Suns are giving him up unless it's a massive haul in return. I'm at least this program, this host you're looking at here with the 2 thumbs pointed his way, is not advocating for Kuminga or even Podziemski in a Kevin Durant trade, just simply because Durant and Stephen Curry are the same age. And Stephen Curry, I don't worry about in terms of him turning 40 and what he can contribute at that stage of his career. I do worry about Kevin Durant and what he could potentially contribute 2-3 years from now when his body really starts breaking down. So I wouldn't hate KD being back on the Warriors. I would not hate that, but I just don't know how you do it, without giving up the farm. Phoenix is not letting him go unless you send them multiple first-round picks. You're including, like, they're not going to give, they're not trading $1 for 4 quarters is what I'm trying to say. That Phoenix is not going to do that. So you'd have to include a really valuable asset to get KD in a trade. Rob Mack saying the Warriors are going to suffer greatly without Klay Thompson's presence. I don't agree with that, but I also am not 100% convinced. I'm also not Notre Dame. You might be right. I don't know, but Bruce Morrow wanted me to relay a message to Rick Barry to for Rick to relay the message to Phoenix Suns assistant coach Brent Barry to maybe do a little nudging for Kevin Durant to come back to the Warriors. I love it. Thank you, everyone. We're done. We'll be back at this soon. I don't know if there'll be a show. This is a ridiculously dead time of year, man. There is nothing to discuss. We did not have an NBA Coast to Coast this week. That'll be back on the docket next week. I'm glad we're going to end the show on what Donovan Michaels threw in, which is Kawhi Leonard. That's a player who fascinates me. I've seen his name mentioned in these hypothetical trades. There's no basis. There's no a basis of reality when we're talking about Kawhi Leonard here in terms of him actually being traded to the Golden State Warriors. With that said, I'm very curious to know what the asking price would be. Because going back to what we were talking about 20 minutes ago with Rick Celebrini's magical medicinal hands, right? The guy knows how to keep athletes on the court. And I wouldn't mind seeing Rick Celebrini work his magic with Kawhi Leonard. I would not mind seeing Kawhi Leonard on this Warriors team. That's a name that fascinates me. That's a name that intrigues me. That's a name where I really do believe if you're not giving up the farm and you're keeping the core of the Warriors together and you're adding Kawhi Leonard, that's a championship contender. That would truly excite me. So I'm glad we finished on that note. But who knows if the Clips would be enticed. I don't know if he's on the market, but Kawhi Leonard would fascinate me, no doubt. And Genji Gok adding that he's a beast, but he's old. He's not that old, is he? What is he, 32, 33? I think he's got a few good years left in him. And he's under contract for a few more years. So regardless of whether he wants more money down the road, you wouldn't have to worry about that immediately. So, but Greg Gordon, you're probably right. It might cost the farm to get him, but that's a name that excites me. Kawhi Leonard, pairing him up with Stephen Curry, with Draymond Green, if you can keep Jonathan Kuminga, Trace Jackson Davis, and most of the other pieces on this roster, if you can entice the Clippers to give up Kawhi Leonard for a package that is, say, GP2, Andrew Wiggins, Kevon Looney, a first-round pick, Moses Moody, yes, right? Sign me up yesterday. But if they're asking for a Lowry Markkanen type package, I don't know. That might be tough. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the Kawhi Leonard mention, because that's a player who would excite me. And we'll see what the Warriors do. There is a trade coming, folks. Who knows when it's going to happen? But until then, we got you covered. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Stephen Curry.